The origin of the five suns. Now, this myth belongs to the Mexica people, often called the Aztecs, and these people understood time not as a straight path, but as a turning wheel. To them, the world did not begin once, nor was it destined to end only once. Creation was an act that could be repeated. Destruction was not a failure of the gods, but a condition of existence. And in this tradition, the world is sustained through balance, and balance is never permanent. When forces fall out of alignment, when power grows too rigid, when knowledge spreads beyond containment, or when the earth itself just grows weary, the age that holds the world comes to an end. What follows is not emptiness, but renewal. The Mexica called each age a sun. A sun is not only the light in the sky, it is the order by which life is arranged. It governs how people live, how the gods rule, and how the earth responds to both. Each sun carries its own laws, its own expectations, and its own failures. Now, according to this cosmology, 4 suns rose and fell before this present age. Each was shaped by a different ruling force, and each ended when the force could no longer sustain the world it had made. These endings were not sudden accidents. They were the natural conclusion of imbalance left uncorrected. Now, the passing of a sun does not mean the death of everything. Life changes form. Memory does not entirely vanish. Traces remain in the land, in the sky, and in the people who come after. And for this reason, the present world is not separate from those that came before it. It is built upon their remains. Now, the current age is known as the 5th age, the sun of movement. It endures not because it is strong, but because it is fed. Its motion is constant, its ground uncertain. Unlike the worlds before it, this sun survives only through continuous offerings, binding the fate of the gods and humanity together in a form of dependence. The 5 suns are not merely stories of the past. They explain why the earth moves, why catastrophe returns in cycles, and why stability must be earned again and again. To understand the suns is to understand that the world is not guaranteed. It is held together by effort, sacrifice, and restraint, and it can be unmade. What follows is the account of those suns, the worlds that rose, the forces that ruled them, and the ways in each one came to its own end. The first sun, the age of strength. Now, in this world, the earth was firm and unyielding, and the sky hung low, as if watching what walked beneath it. The people of the first sun were tall and powerful, shaped in the image of the force that ruled them. Their limbs were heavy with muscle, their voices carried far across the plains, and their heart did not know hesitation. Now, this sun was governed by Tezcatlipoca, the lord of the smoky mirror, whose power lay in dominance and reflection. Under his rule, strength was the highest virtue. To overcome another was proof of worth. To stand unchallenged was to be favored by the gods. The people learned early that this world they belonged to could all be taken away from them. They built no delicate cities, for delicacy was for the weak. Their dwellings were thick-walled and low to the ground. Their tools were heavy, their weapons simple and brutal. What matters was not beauty, but endurance. What mattered was not harmony, but victory. In the first sun, order was maintained through fear. Those who rose to power held it by force, and those beneath them learned obedience through pain. The gods did not intervene to soften the world. They rewarded conquest and silence. Mercy was not taught, and restraint was not admired. The earth at first endured. The forest grew dense and dark. The mountains stood unbroken. Rivers cut their paths without resistance. Life was abundant, but it learned to hide. Creatures of claw and fang thrived, mirroring the nature of the people themselves. The world reflected what ruled it. Over time, the people of the first sun forgot the difference between strength and excess. To dominate was no longer enough. They sought to dominate everything. They hunted not for need, but for proof. They fought not for survival, but for sport. The weak were not protected, and the fallen were never remembered. The gods watched, and the mirror, Lipoca, darkened. The balance that sustained the sun began to strain. Strength unchecked turned inward. The people no longer listened to the earth, nor to the warnings carried by the wind. They believed the world existed to endure them. Then the jaguars came. They did not arrive as an invasion, nor as a punishment announced from the sky. They emerged from the forest, from the mountains, from places where the world itself remembered itself. Silent and patient, they moved as the earth moves, without anger and without haste. The jaguars were not beasts alone. They were the return of the world's will. Where the people struck hardest, the jaguar struck back. Where strength had been worshipped, strength was answered. Villages fell without warning. Paths once claimed by men were reclaimed by claw and shadow. The night grew longer and the ground drank deeply. The people fought as they had always fought. They raised their weapons. They stood their ground. They believed that force could save them. It did not. For the jaguars did not tire. They did not seek glory. They did not rule. They corrected. One by one, the strong were taken. The cries of conquest gave way to silence. The earth closed over what remained. The forest thickened. The mountains stood as they had before. The sky lifted, indifferent. And so the first sun ended. Not in fire, not in blood, but in teeth and shadow. When the jaguars were through, the world was empty of those who had ruled it. Strength alone had proven insufficient to sustain creation. The earth rested, and the gods turned away from what had been made. From the remains of that age, something memory buried in muscle and bone, a warning carried forth into the next world, that strength without restraint will always devour itself. The second sun, the age of wind. The second sun rose in a world that moved. Where the first sun had heavily pressed upon the earth, this new age loosened its grip. The sky lifted higher. The air grew restless. Winds crossed the lands freely, carrying seeds, voices, and memory from one place to another. The world no longer held still. This sun was governed by Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, whose nature was creation, breath, and renewal. Under his guidance, life was shaped not by force, but by movement. Change was welcome. Travel was praised. To remain in one place for too long was to resist the nature of the world. The people of the second sun were lighter of body and quicker of thought. They spoke many languages, and none belonged to them for long. Names shifted with age. Borders were not fixed. Knowledge passed easily from one mind to another, carried on like the wind with pollen. They learned to read the sky. Clouds were signals, breezes were messages. The movement of birds revealed paths yet unseen. The people followed these currents, settling briefly before moving on. Their dwellings were temporary, their cities flexible. Nothing was built to last forever because nothing was meant to. In this age, the gods did not rule through fear. They ruled through inspiration. The people were encouraged to learn, to question, and to seek beyond the horizon. Songs traveled farther than armies ever had. Ideas crossed distances faster than any foot could carry them. And for a time, the balance held. But movement left unchecked does not rest. As the people learned more, they began to outpace the gods who guided them. They discovered patterns in the wind that they had not been taught. They followed currents that led beyond paths the gods had laid out. They asked questions that did not return to their makers. The world grew wide and thin. Communities scattered, lineages burned, memories fractured into many versions of itself. What one group knew, another reshaped. Truth became fluid. The gods found it harder to gather the people's attention, harder to anchor belief in one single form. Quetzalcoatl watched as his creation shifted. The wind that once connected all things began to separate them. Without stillness, there could be no center. Without a center, the world could not hold. The signs appeared quietly. Winds shifted without patterns. Storms crossed paths and tore at one another. The sky spoke in voices that contradicted themselves. The people felt it, but did not stop. The movement had become their nature. Then the wind rose. Not a single storm, but an unraveling. currents pulled against one another. The air thickened and twisted. The ground itself seemed uncertain, which was always going forward. The people were lifted, scattered, and changed. Some were carried so far that they were never seen again. Some were transformed by the force of the wind, reshaped into beings of air and motion. Some simply vanished, absorbed into the endless sky. There was no battle, no moment of resistance. The second sun did not fall, it just dispersed. When the winds were settled, the world was quiet and vast. The past, once traced by feet and memory, had been erased. The land remained, but it was empty of those who roamed it. Quetzalcoatl withdrew, carrying with him the knowledge that freedom without grounding dissolves its own foundation. From the second sun remained a lesson carried forth unseen, that movement must be balanced with return, and that knowledge uncontained would scatter a world beyond recovery. The third sun, the age of fire. The third sun rose in brilliance. Light filled the world in ways it had never done before. The sky burned clear and high, and the day stretched long and bright. Where the second sun had scattered, this age gathered. Heat brought focus, fire brought purpose. The world sharpened itself. This sun was governed by Tlaloc, Lord of Rain and Fire, whose power lay in release and restraint of energy. Under his domain, the forces of nature were no longer distant or mysterious. They were observed, measured, and invoked. The people of the third sun learned to command fire. At first, they used it to shape their world gently. Fire hardened clay and strengthened tools. It brought light to the night and warmth to the cold. With it, the people built cities that endured and rituals that bound them together. The world grew ordered and efficient. But fire teaches quickly. Soon the people learned not only to tend fire, but to draw power from the heavens themselves. They read the sun's movements, the heat of the earth, hidden force within stone and storm. Rituals grew precise. Offerings became calculations. Knowledge was recorded and refined. And this was an age of mastery. Now these people believed understanding granted permission. Each discovery led to another. Each boundary crossed revealed a new source of strength. The gods watched as people reached, pulling energy into forms it was never intended to last. The world glowed. Cities shone against the horizon, alive with light even after the sun had set. The night no longer belonged to the stars. Fire had claimed it. The people celebrated their control, believing themselves aligned with forces that shape creation. But fire does not forget its own nature. As power accumulated, restraint diminished. What began as harmony shifted towards excess. Rituals demanded greater energy. Structures required constant feeding. The people no longer asked whether something should be done, only whether it could be. And the earth began to strain. The skies darkened with heat. The air grew heavy. Rain fell unevenly, either absent or overwhelming. The signs were visible, but dismissed. The third sun had taught people to trust in power, and power had not yet failed them. Then fire returned from above. The sky opened, and the flame fell upon the world like judgment without voice. Not a single blaze, but many. Burning rain that struck cities and fields alike. The structures that had drawn so much energy became conduits for destruction. Stone cracked. Metal warped. The light that had once illuminated the night consumed it instead. The people fled, but there was no refuge. Fire traveled faster than thought. What had been mastered now ruled. The world burned with force it had been taught to release. There was no correction, only consumption. When the flames at last faded, the land was blackened and silent. The cities were reduced to ash. The knowledge that had once seemed eternal had vanished like smoke. The third sun ended in brightness too intense to endure. From its ruin remained a warning carried into the next age, that power without restraint accelerates its own end, and that mastery mistaken for wisdom invites destruction from the very forces it commands. The fourth sun, the age of water. The fourth sun rose into a world that mourned. After the burning of the third world, the earth cooled and softened. Ash settled in the soil, scars filled with water, the sky diminished, and the clouds gathered low, holding their weight. This was an age shaped not by conquest or mastery, but by memory. This sun was governed by Catastrophe, she of the jade skirt, whose power lay in water both life-giving and sorrowful. Under her influence, the world learned to feel again. Rivers widened, lakes deepened, rain returned in steady rhythm. Life emerged cautiously, nurtured by gentle forces. The people of the first sun were bound together by kinship and care. They lived close to the water, listening to its movements and honoring its patience. Stories were preserved. Loss was remembered. The pain of earlier worlds was not hidden, but carried forward. This was an age of deep connection. Communities gathered not for strength or expansion, but for belonging. The people learned to read each other's faces, to sense sorrow before it was spoken. Bonds grew thick and enduring. The world felt intimate, woven together by shared experience. For a time, this balance held, but memory, like water, accumulates. Grief was not released, it was held, shared, and returned again and again. The people mourned not only their own losses, but for the losses of the world itself. Every river carried remembrance. Every raindrop recalled what had been burned and scattered before, and the weight grew. The gods watched as emotion filled every space. Compassion turned inward, becoming heaviness. The people slowed. Movement became effort. Even joy carried the echo of sorrow. Chalchiuhtlicuen wept. Her tears were not punishment, they were simply response. The rains grew longer, rivers spilled their banks, the land drank deeply, then too deeply. Fields softened, paths vanished, the boundaries between water and earth blurred and then dissolved. Still, the people did not flee, they stayed together. They held one another as the waters rose. The flood did not strike suddenly, it came as an unending presence. Day after day, the world submerged itself in remembrance. Homes disappeared beneath quiet currents. Hills became islands. Voices softened and then faded. Some of the people were changed by the water. Their forms adapted, their lives continuing beneath the surface. Others dissolved into the current, becoming part of the world they loved too deeply to leave. There was no violence in the end, only immersion. When the waters finally receded, the land was reshaped. Valleys had shifted, shorelines had moved. The sky reflected itself endlessly in pools left behind. The fourth sun had not been destroyed, it had been absorbed. From this age remained a truth carried forward. That feeling without release becomes weight. That memory without movement becomes drowning. And that even love, unbalanced, can dissolve the world it seeks to hold. The fifth sun, the age of movement. The fifth sun rose in a world that did not trust itself. The land still carried the marks of fire and water. Ash lay beneath the soil. Rivers remembered old paths. Nothing seemed settled. The earth shifted often, as if testing its own weight. This was a world aware of its past endings. The world was governed by Tonatiuh, the sun in motion, whose power was not creation or destruction, but endurance. Under his rule, the world did not seek perfection. It sought continuation. The people of the fifth sun learned early that stability was not given. It was maintained. The ground trembled without warning. The sky darkened and cleared again. Seasons changed sharply. Life persisted, never comfortably. To live in this world was to adapt constantly. From this awareness arose ritual. The people observed the movement of the sun across the sky and understand that it did not travel freely. Each day was an effort. Each rising required energy. The world itself demanded participation, so offerings were made. At first, they were simple: food, breath, time. Actions of attention meant to support the sun's journey. But as the generations passed, the demands grew clearer and heavier. The sun did not move on attention alone. It required fuel. Blood became the currency of continuation, not as cruelty, but as necessity. Life fed life. Motion was sustained by sacrifice. The people did not believe themselves punished, they believed themselves responsible. The gods no longer ruled with certainty. They had learned from the previous suns. Strength had failed, freedom had scattered, power had consumed, and love had drowned. The fifth sun was built on awareness of limitation, and yet fear lingered. The rituals became more precise, the calendars tightened. Time itself was measured and guarded. The people learned to live within cycles, marking days not as progress, but as survival. The world endured because it was watched, but still cracks appeared. Earthquakes shook cities without warning. The ground opened and closed like a living thing. The people understood these signs not as anger, but as strain. Movement, unceasing, wore the world thin. The fifth sun did not promise an end. It promised continuation until it cannot continue. Its fate is not sealed by a single force, but by imbalance return. This sun teaches that survival demands participation, that motion requires cost, and that the world remains only as long as its people live beneath it, knowing what came before them. They build, they remember, they offer. And the sun continues its path across the sky, not because it is eternal, but because it is not yet stopped. Reflection of the suns. The five suns are not remembered as separate worlds, they are layered. Each age left its trace upon the earth and within those who follow. Strength hardened bone, wind loosened thought, fire sharpened desire, water deepened feeling, movement taught endurance. Nothing was entirely lost. The present world stands on the remains of those that came before it. The land remembers, the sky remembers, even the body remembers, though it no longer knows why. The five suns reveal that creation is not a single act, but a condition repeatedly tested. Each world rose according to a ruling force, and each fell when that force exceeded its place. Balance was never permanent, it had to be held, corrected, and restored again and again. The gods learned this slowly. They learned that power alone could not sustain a world, that freedom without return dissolved its center, that mastery burned itself hollow, that love without release submerged all things, and that survival demanded participation from all who lived beneath the sky. The fifth sun endures because it remembers the failures of the others. Yet remembrance is not immunity. The earth still moves. The sun still strains across its path. The rituals continue, not because they are sacred, but because they are necessary. The world does not persist by promise or destiny. It persists by effort. And this is the knowledge carried by the five suns. That no world is guaranteed, that stability is temporary, that continuation requires restraint. The cycle does not threaten, it instructs. As long as balance is held, the suns remain. When it is not, the world will change again. Not as punishment, not as judgment, but as it always has been.